Hi, and welcome back to Stock Talk. So the way I designed the show, I start out with a quick lesson, and then we go through all the stock requests that came through over the course of the last week. So let's go ahead and get into the agenda for today, because I want to save a few minutes just because I want to make sure I can cover this in detail. So today's lesson really is about how to reduce chop. I know what I've written here is how to avoid it, but the reality is if you're regular trading and you're trying to stay consistent, it can be difficult to avoid it completely, and that's okay. You can still make good money and have a consistent equity line while reducing your chop. And when I say chop, it basically I'm saying, reduce the amount of times you get kind of chopped up in an environment that's sort of going sideways. So that's what I want to help with today. I've gotten some questions over the course of the last few months from my subscribers about this, and so I wanted to just spend a few minutes going through it. So we're going to talk about how to define the trend that can help you reduce this choppiness, and then confirm it through momentum characteristics. And then we want to look at multiple time frames, and this will help significantly in reducing trades that are where you're not really trending, or it looks like you're starting to trend again, and yet you never get a trigger. And then we want to talk about the market conditions. So let's go ahead. And actually, just before I do that, let's go into my services. Can be found at rabilstockresearch.com. I provide about 2 to 3 reports each week discussing market. I'm looking for stock ideas. I go through the market. I talk about sectors. And right now, I am still providing a discount to the service. If you go to the individual package and type in StockTalk in the coupon code, you can get the first 2 months for $50. So take a look if you're interested there. Let's go ahead and get into this lesson first. I want to make sure I have plenty of time to go through the individual stocks. So we're going to start with trend and momentum, and I'm using Wheaton Precious Metals. So this is like a silver stock or whatever. And, I'm doing that on purpose because I wanted to show how we go through trending periods and non-trending periods. And obviously, the way I have defined a trending period is, for the most part in this show, I talk about an 18 and a 40 rising, and rising at about the same rate. It doesn't have to be exact, but I'm looking for periods where these lines are kind of moving up. And if the 18 starts to get away too much more quick, or starts to rise more quickly, then I'm a little less interested. But I'm looking for these periods where we have a pretty solid looking pattern between the 18 and the 40. But I also want to mention I'm looking for where price is trending to the upside. So sometimes you can have the moving averages rising and the price is not. It's more like this. And so you want to have both. You're looking for both. So I think that's kind of a key stipulation. And then the other thing I like to see is when I'm making new highs in price, I want to make sure the MACD is also making the MACD line itself is making a new high. And I like to see the ADX get at least above this horizontal line around 25. So this right here is about the minimum requirement that I would have. Before I get a pullback, I like to see the blue line, the ADX line, get at least above 25. Now, I think if you reduce your trades to something along these lines where you have these 3 criteria in place. Number one, it's a self-regulating approach, meaning if the market is not good and we're not seeing a whole lot of ideas, you're not going to see this. This pattern is not going to develop. You're not going to get confirming momentum, and you're not going to have a clean trending pattern with the 18 and the 40 rising. You're going to start to see these kind of patterns like this, where look at this 18 waving back and forth, and look at how price is not respecting the 18. A little bit there, and then back through, and then back up, down. It's really not respecting the line like it was here. Didn't quite make it here, definitely respected here and here. So, I think if we can just focus our efforts on stocks that are showing these kind of criteria, number one, I think you're going to save yourself a whole lot of heartache. Now, it can be very difficult. This is why you have to have a trading plan. You have to write this down, and then you got to follow your plan. You can't go, if you see the market going up and stocks aren't meeting your criteria, you have to pass. So anyway, I think that's a pretty important factor. Now, let's look at multiple time frames. So I'm zeroing in on this last pullback on this WPM, and we can see where we had a pretty good momentum condition in place on this rally. We were making a higher high, right? And we had a pretty good looking momentum trending condition based on the moving averages and the fact that we were making higher highs. So that's all a plus. Now, I'm not even going to talk about the fact that we're running into some problems with this gap down and this top here. I'm just saying on this pullback, if I go to the lower time frame and look at what was taking place and look at how violent the selling was based on the selling, look at how much overrun you had on the MACD, this is going to keep you from stepping in this area. It's just not, there's just no signal here. In fact, what ended up happening after this sort of started to roll a little bit, we had a reverse divergence where MACD went to a higher high, price went to a lower high, and that was actually a sell signal. So these are the types of things I think if you go down to the smaller time frame can help you dramatically. And then just lastly, I want to make sure you understand you want to always be looking at the market conditions. And what I call market conditions, I'm looking at the trend of the market, and I'll usually find the time frame that I think is trending. And normally, the weekly is usually very important. You can see that's the trend time frame for the S&P. But starting, say, somewhere around July, we started not to get momentum confirmation at that point. And so the market's been moving up. Now, that doesn't mean you stop trading. You look for stocks that still have good momentum characteristics because we have a trend in place. But you might want to reduce your position size or be a little bit more careful about your entries from this point on. So that's one thing. And then you look at volatility. And this volatility, I use ATR. This is on a weekly basis. Notice how the ATR was making lower highs and lower lows on the weekly, and now just since September, it's started to shift. So now we're in a position where not only is the momentum not all that great, but neither is the volatility. And then overbought, oversold would be the distance from the 18 MA. Now, it's not showing up on a weekly chart, but on a monthly chart, this is the 18-month. Look at how far away we've gotten. So these are the types of things you want to be looking at. We had a period here through this period right here, basically, where everything was running on all cylinders. This is where you try and make your money. This is where you're going to find the best trades. And then as things start dropping off, we lose a little momentum, and then we start to lose volatility. It gets tougher. And if you've noticed recently, I would think if you're trying to trade anywhere from 3 days to 3 weeks, it's gotten tougher. There's a lot more gaps. There's a lot less trending moves. And so I think a lot of that has to do with these market conditions, something you want to keep track of. So anyway, I hope this helps. We're going to get into the individual stocks now and do some analysis, looking for trends, looking for momentum confirmation, and then also looking at them in multiple time frames. Let's get going. Okay, so as we get into the stocks, one thing I wanted to point out, because someone had emailed me and said they recreated my setup, and I wanted to make sure, just to make it easy on you, if you click on the chart styles up on the left and go down to experts, you can click on any one of these frames and click on Joe Rabil, and this chart will pop up. So you could do these three very easily if you want to get the ADX, MACD, and the moving average lines looking the same. So I just thought I'd point that out just to simplify things for you, save you some time. Okay, so first stock here is First Industrial Realty. And the other thing I wanted to follow up on in the discussion when I look at charts, and kind of the first thing I'm looking at is I am trying to identify where the last signal was. And if I look at this chart, I can see the monthly actually flipped over and turned positive way back in 2012, and has been, look at how these lines have been parallel for a very, very long time. Stayed rising throughout all of the declines we've had, even the one in 2020. And but now notice how far away it is from the 18-month. This is the first time this has happened throughout this whole period. So that would tell me we're starting to get the trend is starting to accelerate a little bit, and that tells me it's probably getting a little late. So the last actual signal that I see is we had a nice pullback on the weekly chart here. With good ADX, and we've made a nice run. And then we had a daily signal right here on this pullback with parallel lines and good ADX and a reverse divergence pattern with the MACD and the MACD and the price pattern. So those are, those are pretty good signals. Now we're getting, I think, getting a little stretched away from the 18 week. We're certainly stretched away from the 18 months. So, we have to wait for another signal, but just recognizing where we are in the bigger trend, you have to realize there is a little bit more risk associated with this. Okay, let's go on to MARA. So, this is another one, and I like to point this out when I see these. So we get a move like this or a strong move to the upside, and then we come back and consolidate and work our way back through the moving average and pull back. We get a little pinch here. We have low ADX. Green starting to improve to the upside after a big run. This is really the quality entry point if I'm going to play this. And then it just kind of took off and went a little nuts. Got very overdone, and now look at how sharp the pullback is. And yeah, I think we're getting into some support here in the low 40s. The problem I've got is because this is so sharp, I now think the way this re-entered this resistance area here, this was resistance. And now I think it's going to become resistance again, almost potentially forming like a right shoulder. Somewhere in the low to mid 50 zone is where I think we're going to have some problems if this does try and rally off support. So not a whole lot of interest in this right now, just too sharp a decline. Some big red bars to deal with coming back up. PFG, Principal Financial. So, really not a bad overall pattern. What I don't like is this upward drift that we've got going here. We're not really getting the confirmation on a MACD or ADX basis. And, if we're going to move up like this, I do want to see green DI at least start to move back above 25. And this hasn't been able to do that. So that is having me think that maybe this old top up here is going to provide some resistance for now. We already see it on the monthly bar. You see that big topping tail that formed? So I think this is going to struggle a little bit to get through this resistance. With that said, I still think the overall pattern looks okay. I just don't know that I would consider it timely right now. I think this is going to work sideways longer. Let's look at Silvergate Capital. This is another one that had a really nice setup back in here as it was lifting off the 100 level with the MACD reversal at the 0 line and low ADX. Really attractive. And then again, it just kind of exploded, got a little nuts. And now the sell-off is a little too violent for me. I don't like this big red bar coming down. And yeah, we're coming back to the 18-week here, but the way this is doing it, the velocity of the move, the drop is too sharp. And so I think you have to expect some consolidation. That's assuming this can even hold. It might not hold. If it does, I think we're going to consolidate a little bit rather than turn on a dime. Lam Research, been a great stock and pulled back to the 0 line on the MACD. So if you look at this, the way this is making lower lows and lower highs, but it was just working off an overbought condition. MACD got way overdone. And now we've worked our way back to the 0 line. So, and we had low ADX. Now we had a little bit of red showing up here, showing that sellers were maybe a little bit stronger than the average. But in reality, I would still have looked at this as a potential play on the downtrend line break because of the way the 0 line was holding very nicely. So that was kind of that setup. We've made a nice run now, and the ADX is confirming this move. We've got some resistance up around 725. I would actually play that as the target if I'm in this. If I got in this down in the 600, low 600s or something like that, 725 would be kind of like the next target zone for me. And then recognize that we're getting near the end of the year, and a lot of times a stock that's had a strong run will run into the new year and then correct into as the new year approaches or return over into the new year. Green Brick Partners, great looking pattern. So this is, I think this is something worth talking about. If you look at the way this played out, you see how this was kind of working sideways. This was more of a sideways pattern, and MACD is going like this. This is sort of an elongated reverse divergence pattern where it happened a few times, where this pattern is just more neutral in price, and this is working off the overbought condition, and it just took a while. And once it got down to there, it was kind of game on. Look at that big green bar that kicked things off to the upside. You had a low ADX pattern in place. What I like most about this is the big picture pattern. Look at the ADX in place on this. So if you got this, looking at this from a longer term standpoint, this really looks attractive, even though it has made a little bit of a move in here. I would obviously like to have gotten it a little closer to the breakout level at 28, but any kind of a little dip might be worthwhile, especially if you're looking at it from a bigger picture standpoint. Okay, I got a request to look at a few of these potash and NTR, ICL, some of the stocks in the chemical area, and I wanted to just follow up on that. So we got this move to the upside and a pullback, and most of these fertilizers, I think overall look pretty good, but we've pulled back to this breakout area on this one, and I probably would have preferred to see the ADX cross above 25 a little stronger, but we did get green DI here. So I think I'd be willing to look at the daily chart for a reversal signal. It might take a little bit more than just a break to the upside. I think you're going to probably have to do one of these where you make a higher low, but I would be watching this. I think the overall pattern looks good. We got really strong ADX on the monthly chart. I mean, look at what this is doing. Rising ADX at 37, coming out of a pretty big base. So definitely worth watching. ICL hasn't really pulled back. I mean, notice the difference here. Both of these are supposedly kind of fertilizer guys, but look at how this is run, and it just won't pull back. Now, I mean, that's a sign of strength, but it also is a sign to me that there's not a whole lot I can do with this other than hold it. The last real entry was down here, closer to 7.5 on that breakout. So right now I would say it's more of a hold than a buy. If it gets another setup, it would have to go through probably a complex correction on the daily chart to set up again. Nutrien, NTR. So I've liked this one, but this is another one where we have to evaluate. Look at the monthly chart. It hasn't really had a correction. It had a couple of pauses. It had a pause here and a 1-bar pause here, but you really haven't pulled back at all in a while. And the start of this trend was back here on the weekly. So you have to realize, okay, you break out and then you get a pullback to the 18, another pullback to the 18 as your third pullback to the 18. I mean, yeah, it's possible we could run back to the upside, maybe break out again. But I would think now, just based on the way this is playing out, that it probably, even if it might break to a new high, I think you have to play this a little tighter right now, because I would be looking for a move that creates some more of a complex correction at some point here before too long, just based on the longevity of the trend only. Overall pattern looks good. The momentum conditions are okay. So it's possible it could keep going, but the odds kind of favor this, looking for maybe after a new high, we go through a little bit more of a corrective pattern. Okay, Tower Semi. This is another one that I'm trying to, so I get questions on these, and I want to distinguish between trends that look good when I'm analyzing. So if I'm analyzing this, the trend in this is good, it's strong. The question is it a setup? I mean, is it a buy right now? And I think your last buy signal was down here. I mean, always try and locate the trend of where you want to play, and then know that you're trying to get it as close to the 18 as possible. If you're stretched away from the 18 like it is right now, I don't really think that's a play. Certainly not on the weekly. I mean, if you wanted to play this on the daily, maybe, but then we're looking at being stretched away on the monthly, stretched away on the weekly. So you have pullback risk on the two higher time frames. So if I'm playing this off a daily chart here, and I'm stretched away from the 18 on both of these time frames, I'm just taking on a lot more risk. I don't like to do that. I like to be a little closer. If I'm closer, even on one of the two time frames above, below the bigger time frames, then I'm getting a little bit more interested. But I think this down here, down around 30, lifting off of 30 after this broke out and pulled back was really the setup. So just something I wanted to make sure I covered. Okay, so Facebook or Meta, whatever you want to call it now. So I wanted to bring this one up. Actually, this was my request. I put this in myself. And the reason why I did this is because it makes up a pretty good portion or represents a pretty strong portion of the XLC, the communication sector. And the communication sector has made a pullback. It has pulled back like this, and it actually has this sort of ABC decline. I thought this one was interesting because the Meta looked pretty interesting because it was coming back to 300. And notice how that was pretty important support. Now we're getting a really good reaction off this. So I think you could play this as a undercut and rally because you undercut this prior low. It happens to be a key level here. So what I'd be looking for on the daily chart is for this to move up, and then if it can make a higher low, something like that. Now, we're going to have to deal with the 18-week. So what you probably want to see it do is come up to the 18-week and then kind of as it's triggering on the daily coming back up like that, it's at least above or getting through the 18-week. And I think if it plays out that way, this could get interesting because we have the zero line reversal, we have low ADX. It had a really strong reading in ADX on the upside. So something to keep an eye on. I know I don't normally put my own requests in, but every now and again I want to get a point across, and no one had asked for FB in a while. Okay, Twitter. So here's a violent decline. I mean, we can see on the monthly chart we came down, made a lower high, and then a lower low. So it's on a monthly chart, it's an ABC decline. But notice what's happening. We've got pretty good support here. Now, the problem I've got with this is the violence of the decline. It was just too. The size of these bars are big, red bars. The momentum condition's not really that bad. I mean, it's pretty strong ADX, but it's too violent for me to want to play this right now. I think what's going to happen to this is it's going to get caught between the 18 and the 40. You see how the 18 is here? This 18-month, I think, is going to flatten out before the stock can get back through it. And I would not be surprised if we end up channeling between where it is now, which looks like pretty good support, in the low 40s, to resistance up in the mid to high 50s. So just something to keep an eye on this stock. And there are a lot of tech stocks that have been hammered like this. There is rally room. But don't misconstrue that into thinking that this is going to turn into something more meaningful right away. I don't think that's what we should be looking for. I think we could get a rally up, and then I think they could get hit a little bit harder again. Pretty violent decline when you look at the MACD. Grayscale Bitcoin. So I wanted to look at this as well. This was a good request. So this represents the Bitcoin, and at least something you can trade on the stock market. So notice how we had this peak here. You came down. You did this signal. I thought this was a great signal here with the pinch play in low ADX, and we got a nice run. But it ran up against this old high, and just like Bitcoin did, I think Bitcoin actually went to a minor new high, but has had a pretty violent pullback. And the break of the 18 and the 40 week kind of put this on hold for now. I think you got a trading range that's going to develop that is going to make this kind of sloppy. I wouldn't be in any big rush to be buying Bitcoin or this right now. I just don't think it's ready. It doesn't mean that it's going to fall apart. I'm just saying, if I'm looking for an entry and looking for a buy, I don't see the setup right now. I think there could be a little bit more downside risk. For this, it's probably closer to 35. Okay, Boyd Gaming. I'm glad someone asked for this, and the reason why is because I get a lot of requests about the gaming stocks, and I think this one has held up the best. If you notice the way this has played out, we had a strong run on the monthly, and it's just kind of going sideways. I mean, most of the others are doing more of a ABC downward, and there's a little bit of violence in the selling, and this is holding up very, very well. So I'm impressed with this. We have this MACD pattern that is a little bit more unique, where as the moving averages have come together, now that we're getting this dip and testing, we're getting kind of a double bottom here in MACD, well above the zero line. Normally when you get a double bottom, it happens at the zero line or maybe a little bit below. But there's a low ADX and no real sign of sellers here. So this is one I think I would be watching pretty close. You could look for the daily chart. Because we had a little bit of selling here, we could wait for the green to get going. And the reason why I tell people to wait for the green is the green is going to keep you out of the choppiness. If you're getting chopped up, you probably have red and green on the daily that are below 25 and you're trying to get a trade off and you're getting stopped out, trade off, stopped out, that kind of thing. If you wait for the green to get going and hold 25, then I think you're going to see that this is going to get going. So very, very key point. I wanted to make sure I covered when I got into the individual stocks, but if you want to stay out of chop, you want to make sure that either green or red, depending on which way you're going, has some kind of a trend going, especially at a minimum on the daily chart. DHI, I think this is a strong stock. It's trying to break out. It actually just broke out at 100. We had a really nice pullback. I mean, this was a great setup. It broke out at 100 and then pulled back here. Very orderly with strong ADX. So as this is coming back up, probably on this green bar would be the entry. Now we need a little bit of a pullback, but I do like the looks of this, and really the group action I think is pretty outstanding as well. That's it for today. Thanks for joining me. Please send those stock requests to stocktalk@stockcharts.com. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Hey guys, Dave Keller here with stockcharts.com. Thanks so much for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, and we hope you did, hit the like button right below. Also, we have so much new content every day. Consider subscribing to the channel. Just hit the subscribe button in the video or right below. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Have a fantastic day.